Shannon, it's so nice to have you here, and I appreciate you bringing such beautiful samples of your designs with you. And I know you teach classes throughout the country, but how you started out as an elementary school teacher. So how did you get into this angle of it?
So while I was teaching, I was also quilting and falling in love with the craft and playing with different techniques, and my technique scrappy applique kind of grew out of that, and so then it was only a natural transition to then start teaching it.
Well, I bet it would be, if, you know, teaching, and you also teach children, young adults as well. So having that background in education, I'm sure would help.
Absolutely.
I always think knowing that there are resources either online or in a book, because you can watch a demonstration and then you get home, or at least for me, and you think, how did she say to cross over, or was it under? Well, thank you. We're going to show some examples of your technique is called scrappy applique.
Yes.
And the thing that we're going to show today is using the satin stitch. Why do you like that?
It's my favorite way to finish an applique piece. I love raw edge applique. It's quicker. I think there's a little bit more freedom as to the shapes you're creating. And so a satin stitch just closes those raw edges, seals them, and I think frames the applique piece nicely.
And I noticed in some pieces you've not gone over the edge, but for instance down here you outlined a portion of this one. So
with the clear thread. Absolutely.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I like the animals.
Oh, I think they're sweet.
And cityscapes, I guess, or I was going to say seascapes, but you also do those as well.
There's so many different images that you can create. So this is the skyline of Milan, Italy.
So if all those photographs that we always take, this would be a good way to preserve them and be able to have them out where we could look at them more often.
Absolutely.
Smaller examples. In fact, both of these have the applique, but tell us about the thread you chose.
So this one, the other ones were just a solid colored thread, whereas these are variegated threads. So there's variation in the color of the thread. So we have some different shades of blue or turquoise in there, and some oranges and golds. It just creates kind of a different effect in the satin stitch.
And is this just like in regular quilting? Is it just 100% cotton thread?
Yep, I use 100% cotton. You could also use polyester, and I just use a regular 50 weight thread, which is what you would use when you're sewing, you know, any other projects.
And you don't have to make adjustments on your needle size, just a regular, what is it, a number 10 or 12 or something?
Yeah, a regular size 12 needle works great. You just will adjust the stitch length and width on your zigzag stitch.
Okay, whether you want it close together or real tight or how wide.
Exactly, and some machines come with a satin stitch built in, and if not, you can just use a zigzag stitch, and you'll adjust your length and width to create that nice dense satin stitch.
And before we talk about the satin stitch, we need to find out how to get that design, whether it's the leaf or the animals, onto our fabric.
Absolutely. So my favorite way to do that is what I call my image transfer, my magic image transfer technique.
Okay.
I think it feels like magic. So you're going to trace your image onto a piece of parchment paper using either a regular number 2 pencil or a Sharpie.
Okay.
So since parchment paper is non-stick, the image is not going to stay on there. And then we're going to use fusible web. I like this non-paper-backed fusible web. So it's heat-activated adhesive, but it's dry to the touch. It only, you know, activates with the heat.
Iron will be what causes the activation.
Absolutely. So we put that on top of the image with the inky side, you know, touching the fusible web. And then we put a piece of fabric on top of that.
It's just a sandwich.
Yep, absolutely. And we're just then going to hit it with our iron.
And do you use a dry iron preferably?
Yes,
steam?
yeah. It depends on the fusible web that you use, but typically just a dry iron. You don't really need the steam.
Okay.
All right. So we just press it according to the manufacturer's instructions, and we're going to wait for it to cool a bit. And then once we peel it off, we'll see. The image is now...
The magic is now transferred onto
Exactly.
that.
So then you can just cut it out, and you have your applique piece.
So that one has the...
Yep, exactly. This is already now cut out.
Okay, got that.
And then we place it on whatever background fabric and just press it into place. And you're ready to
What's so nice about that is no pins to stitch over.
Absolutely.
It holds it
nice exactly. And then you want to use, anytime you're using a quilting weight cotton, any of these lighter weight fabrics, you want to use a stabilizer before you satin stitch.
Oh.
Otherwise, you're going to get what's called tunneling, where the zigzag stitch starts to pinch the fabric and creates all kind of
I've
puckers.
seen that, yeah. And you do use a fairly narrow stitch.
I do, yeah. So I like this iron-on tearaway stabilizer is my favorite type to use with a satin stitch. So we just ironed it onto the back, and it fuses onto the back, but not so much that you can't pull it away really easily.
And that's how you did all of these designs, with the stabilizer.
Absolutely.
And this is an example of ones, and this is a very narrow satin stitch.
It is, yeah. My typical, the range for the width, the stitch width, is between maybe a 2.2 all the way up to a 3 or a 3.5 millimeter width, depending on, you know, how small. This is probably like a 2.5.
If it's a big, huge design, would that ever have you widen the stitch?
I would, yeah, maybe up to a 3 or even a 3.5 width if
see.
you want kind of a chunkier satin stitch.
And I guess it doesn't matter. They all look pretty, so
Yeah, I
doesn't
think so.
really
Yeah, but the more detailed ones, you definitely want a more narrow stitch. And then we're gonna to achieve a nice kind of tidy satin stitch. Like anything, satin stitching, you know, takes some practice. It's not going to be perfect at first, which I think is okay. We're not going to stress about perfectionism, but we're going to approach the different angles slightly differently.
Well, I noticed this does have very sharp angles.
Absolutely.
That looks like that might be hard.
Yeah, yeah. So for example, when you're going around what I call a gentle curve, so you are just going to turn your work as you're stitching. However, if you're going around a sharper curve, I know that's an oxymoron, but if you're, so for example, like let's say like the hoof of this horse here, you're going to stitch a few, stop with your needle down, turn your work no more than 45 degrees, and then continue on, stitch a few more, needle down, turn your work no more than 45 degrees till you make your way all the way around that stitch. So you have a nice smooth stitch all the way around.
Okay. And then when you do these sharp, how do you do those?
So for the corners here, you're just going to stitch to that edge, stop with your needle down. I always have my needle down when I'm turning my work, and then continue on in the new direction. So that the corners are a little easier, the points. However, these inside corners is where it's a little trickier. So you're going to stitch to that corner, and then stitch a few more stitches into the applique piece. And then with your needle down, continue working in the new direction. Since you stitch a little bit more into the applique piece, just the width of that satin stitch, those stitches then overlap, creating a nice sharp corner.
Oh, I see. So
Yes.
that's why you go on in really the length of the satin stitch.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly. And those are, you know, some kind of little picky details, but then with these really detailed work, it helps to have
And
those
you
nice
learn
sharp.
more and feel more comfortable doing it.
It's going to get
as
better
you-
and better the more you do it,
You
just like
promise.
anything else. I
Okay.
promise.
Well, it's really interesting, and they do look like they're very difficult to do, but like you say, by using the fusible web and by using the machine and not having to hand turn those edges under, so much easier.
Oh yeah, I can do a piece like this in, you know, maybe an hour or so, the whole thing. It's pretty quick.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. The book will be a good resource, and remembering what we've seen on the samples is really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you.